The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Top of the morning, everybody. It is the Unconventional Therapist. I am your host, Dave, and I am joined here with my co-host, Gregory McGregor.
Great. Wow.
How are you, Greg?
Got a little theme going today, huh? I gotta admit, Dave, I did not see that coming.
I threw you off, didn't I?
You did. This is your time of year, though, right? Isn't this?
It is my unofficial time.
You guys are always wearing green at the office.
That is a Tuesday thing.
Okay. And just so we're talking Ireland here, right? We're talking St. Paddy's Day coming up. You know, this is a little bit of more of a darker subject than last year's leprechauns.
We did leprechauns last year, huh?
Yeah.
Did you learn a lot in last year's leprechaun episode? Like that you applied to today?
Did I take a piece of the leprechauns with me through the year?
Yeah. Does it come up a lot in sessions, as most of our topics commonly do?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. The leprechauns did not quite make their shoehorn their way into sessions.
Could you actually tell me one bit of information that came out in that leprechauns episode that you remember to this day?
I know what a shillelagh is.
What is it?
It's like a club you fight with. An Irish club.
That has nothing to do with leprechauns, though. That's just like a thing. That's
yeah. No, you know, I do remember. I remember a lot about changelings. I remember some Irish folk.
Changelings.
Completely different thing.
Episode.
I know. Completely different thing.
So, are you acknowledging that you don't remember one thing from the episode of leprechauns?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and then next year,
Greg, that's fine. The episode about leprechauns really barely needed you anyway. So
I gotta admit that one.
Whatever.
I mean, I love leprechauns. I remember
clearly not enough to remember them.
You know what's funny? Here's the thing. I thought I loved leprechauns, and then after researching leprechauns, turns out I don't.
I remember that you brought up Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Sure, I almost brought it up today too.
Well, that would have been redundant, and you also would not have remembered that you brought it up last year, so you would have felt like that was new information, and we would have been bored.
Really missed the mark if I would have brought it up this year.
Oh man,
because that is not what we're talking about here.
Me and the audience would have been in an uproar.
Yeah, so I'm just going to erase that from the notes and move along with this thing.
Greg, do you like a potato?
You know what? I love a potato. I love
a potato.
This is hard hitting stuff.
How do you eat your potatoes?
Oh man, I take them anyway. You got them. I like a twice baked. I love a potato skin. You don't see them as much as you used to.
Can I tell you a story about me?
Sure.
Do you remember a story that we had to read as a child called The Whipping Boy?
No.
No?
No, I didn't read that.
The Whipping Boy. You know what that means?
No.
Kind of like a whipping boy is kind of like a scapegoat, isn't it? It's like the boy that like takes the whippings for everything.
Okay.
I don't remember anything about that story except for one thing. He eats boiled potatoes, I believe. And I always thought the idea of eating just a boiled potato, like almost like the way people eat apples, just walking around eating a potato. Like I always thought that like sounded good, like dip it in some milk. That's a very weird thing. I don't know why. I feel like he does that in the story, or I made it up in my head and I attributed it to that story to justify my want to like dip a potato in milk and just munch on it. You know,
maybe you can hit the cereal market and move over Lucky Charms. Here comes potato milk.
Oh, I do love some cereals.
I know you do, Dave. All right, so we are talking.
Why am I talking about potatoes?
We're talking about the Irish.
Do you think of Irish people when you think of potatoes, or do you think of other stuff?
I think of people from Idaho, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird?
It is. But I'll tell you something.
You really go into your spiel, don't you?
Yeah, I always like to do a little overview, but I'm not gonna.
I can always tell when you're about to go into your monologue because like you do a certain thing, right?
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh man, is it the weird thing I do?
It's a tonal change, and you'll like have like a statement. But before I do this, the tone change.
We've been doing this. Maybe we've been doing this for a while, and I'm happy about it. But let's get sad.
See, you just did it.
I just did it again. I just did it again. It's always going to be like, it's almost like, what was that show where like there was the redheaded detective and it was like a CSI Miami, I think. And he would be like, Like he would say some like line and then put his sunglasses on. I think that's what I do every time. Like I try to like switch it up and then get right into it.
Yeah.
All right. So are you hungry for this topic?
Oh boy.
Okay. I'm sorry, that one. I'm running out of them. Okay. Here we go. Between the years 1845 and 1852, 1/8 of the entire Irish population died. So a million people. So there's 8 million people. Population is 8 million in the 1845. A million people die. A million people immigrate. So that's a huge chunk of the population. Like 25% of the population, right? Gone off the island. So this has a lasting effect in the country. And by the time the Irish gained independence in around 1920, there was half the people that there were before the famine. So 1920, there's 4 million people. It's like the only place in the world where the population went down that much. Where everyone else's population is skyrocketing, the Irish have half the people that they used to, right?
Yeah.
So before we go any further, I have to ask you, because when I thought of the Irish potato famine, or the Great Hunger as we know it now, like what did you think about? I didn't really think of it as a huge deal, to be honest. I just
I
kind of thought like they ran
well
out of potatoes.
that my understanding was kind of what it is, but I didn't understand the severity of what that caused. And as we know now, and kind of what made us curious about this topic is the impacts of this were long lasting way past the period of the famine, right? It did way more than just impact the population during that time. It possibly impacted generation after generation.
Yeah, it might even be what we know. Like if this didn't happen, I hate to say stereotypes, but the things that we think of when we think of the Irish might not be the same thing, right? It's completely changed their cultural identity because of this blight.
And you know what's funny? I just say this because um, I won't get too far into it because it will be part of the narrative a little bit. But like, I've always had like a fond view of the Irish, and it turns out that at the time was not the general consensus, especially in the neighboring Britain, right?
Mhm. Well, I wonder if that's what Britain had to tell themselves to make it okay what they were doing to the Irish. So let's kind of get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So in the year 1800, nice and even here, the Act of Union passes Parliament, and Dublin um, has to sort of agree and become part of Great Britain. So Ireland becomes part of Great Britain. And here's the thing, though: Britain is overwhelmingly Protestant, and Ireland is Catholic. We at
Because
some
of
point
St. Patrick, which
St.
will
Patrick, right?
probably be next year's St. Patrick's
Yeah,
Day
probably should have been
episode.
this year. That would have made a little more sense, but that's all right. We'll figure that out after. So Ireland is Catholic, and Catholics are not allowed to be in parliament, so there's no representation. There's going to be a lot of parallels between like things that happen here and things that happen in America. So the British believe that the Catholics can't be trusted. So here's this country that's overwhelmingly Catholic being run by a country who's overwhelmingly Protestant and pretty much discriminates against the entire population, right?
Yeah.
So by 1829, things are moving forward, things are progressing, and most of these laws are gone. But so much in the same way that in 1865 slavery ends, right? But then there's all this Jim Crow laws, and it's not for another century that we start to see like change in America, right? It's not until the 1960s that we see change in America. So the same thing's happening here. They have this hatred of the Catholics, and it doesn't make things easier in the country. Just because the laws are changed and now they might have some representation in parliament, things are still pretty horrible. There's people farming the land. Go ahead.
So, one of the things I think is interesting is that hatred towards the Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
or that discrimination. It's odd to me because it starts like there's these stereotypes that they feed into that are change like that, like really fuel the attitudes of the British towards the Irish. Do you know what some of those stereotypes are?
No, I don't.
Well, they're considered to be lazy. They're considered to not care about anything like how they dress, their living conditions. Basically, they paint this portrait of the Irish as being these individuals who are just like carefree. They don't care about anything. They'll settle for anything. All they care about is drinking.
Oh yes.
So they'll use like whatever money they have to cover like the necessities, which would be like the bare minimum clothing, the bare minimum living situations. They don't care about. They consider them uncivilized, basically. Any extra money they had beyond like the necessities was spent on alcohol, and that was kind of their point of view of who the Irish were.
Yeah,
And
but this
that
is
attitude like definitely will fuel what happens later, but that's existed for like way beyond before the famine started.
so that's something that you're going to see over and over again with like imperialism. When we read Echeve's book Things Fall Apart, this was the same kind of thing. Like the British are coming into a different part of the world and they're like, look at these savages. They live differently than us. They're lesser than us. But then when you understand the community, it's like, no, they're just a different culture and they have different things. Like maybe powdered wigs and stockings and buckle shoes aren't important to them, but like hanging out with family and having some fun and singing and not spending money on the things that they don't think are important. It's just a different culture, just like the Native Americans, right?
Yeah.
Like how is that a lesser civilization just because they're different? It's almost like if you don't act like me, then you're
Mm-hmm.
wrong, and that's
Yeah.
kind of a bummer.
And this is interesting too, because we're talking about basically racism without the race being the factor. It's
Yeah, I know.
culturalism, right?
It's interesting because they parallel each other very. It's you creating another. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, I almost think that racism itself is a construct too. When it's in the Americas, it's just like we have to create this person so that we can exploit them and feel okay about it, right? So they have to make
Well, we're
Catholics are
constantly doing it.
lazy and this and the other thing.
Yeah, we're constantly doing it.
Constantly doing that, and you see it's over and over again. And you're going to see parallels here. So the people that are farming this land, they're just renters. But what sucks about that and the psyche, like one part of the psyche here is this used to be their land owned by their families, and the landlords that take care of this land, the Earl of this or the Duke of that, including Sir Walter Raleigh, right? They don't even live in the country. So what do they care about the conditions, right? It's incredible. And it just how would that feel to be having to pay rent, barely be able to pay rent on the land that's yours before like Cromwell invades in the 1600s? That's your family's property. And someone like stole it from you, and now you have to pay them to earn the right to farm it.
Yeah.
Kind of insane.
It is. Crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. So you want to talk about the actually what's going on here with the famine itself, like what we're talking about when we talk about the potato famine?
So yeah, and Greg, is there other names for the potato famine?
The Great Hunger?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about all I got.
Okay.
The Hunger? What do you got?
I don't know. I was just asking.
Yeah, so the Irish don't call it.
There are a few other ones. I just can't remember what they were. I didn't write them down.
So I think the Hunger and the Great Hunger are the ones I've heard. There's a documentary called The Great Hunger, and Liam Neeson narrates the whole thing, so it's like pretty legit.
If you look up the Great Famine, there are other famines that might come up. So you have to like the Great Irish Famine or the Great Irish Hunger. You have to be a little bit specific, I guess. I didn't realize there was all these different famines.
Hey, look, famines happen, and it's a terrible thing. So what's going on with this famine specifically is, now this is a great nickname, or I don't know if I should say that, but there's a specific kind of potato, and it's called the Irish lumper.
Whoa, Greg, watch your mouth.
Yeah.
Not on this podcast. You're not going to.
So the Irish lumper is all right. So here's something interesting. This potato is not native to Ireland, right? And everyone's planting the same exact potato, which creates a species that's not diverse at all. And if we learned anything from our inbreeding episode, we learn that if there's no diversity in a species, that leaves an organism vulnerable to disease.
Why did they all start planting that potato though?
Because it's an import and they're hardy and
don't they have like just really, didn't they end up finding that their farming conditions were good for that?
Yeah. So
that kind of crop.
If you've seen Ireland, it's like perfect for like, I think almost, it seems like any farming. but especially potatoes, 'cause it's always kind of moist and damp, and you can stick them in the ground after you pull them up, and they stay good for a while. But this got a sort of a disease to it, a blight they call it, an organism
Yeah.
that caused them to die almost immediately after you pull them out of the ground, and it affected like 90 to 100% of the potato population. Before I go any
Dang.
further, I have a little segment I wanted to throw your way. So potatoes, not native to Ireland. I find that interesting, right? Horses and chicken, not native to America. That's interesting too, right?
Yeah.
Tomatoes, not native to Italy.
Hmm.
I call that segment food for thought, Dave.
Oh,
So honestly, it's just like there's something when I was thinking about this, I was like, I don't know. Nature, when you try to manipulate nature and make things be the way they're not supposed to be, like the way we plant things and the way we grow fish and what we do to chickens, it's like nature's gonna bite back after a while, it seems like.
we
Right?
constantly do that. We constantly bring like an animal to a place it doesn't belong, or yeah, that's
Yeah,
we're just
it
riddled
never
with
goes
that
well.
history. No.
It's like you think we would learn from something like
It's
that.
like when we brought spam to Hawaii.
Actually, I think that turned out okay.
Yeah, it did
Keep it over
actually.
there. My cholesterol's high enough without it. So these potatoes become diseased. The whole crop's destroyed. I mean, across the board, the whole country, right? So the British liberal government, so I say that, because they decide to take a hands-off approach,
Laissez-faire, if you will.
laissez-faire, yeah. So, which means hands-off approach in French, right? So that's sort of similar to what Hoover's conservative government did in America during the Great Depression. Just this hands-off approach. Like, I don't want to start helping
Yeah,
people out.
but why did they
Give it,
do this?
well, because they don't want to give handouts and screw up the economy, right? Or does it go a
No,
little
it's
bit
because they
deeper?
don't. It's because they didn't like the Irish.
Okay, well, so that
They don't.
okay,
It's yeah. It's really them allowing the Irish to kind of suffer in a way, if you think about it.
yeah, but do you think that was the real? Like, do you really think that it was they wanted them to suffer like that? I
Yeah,
mean, I know they can't see him because what about in America? Like, I
there's a
don't think
lot of
Hoover wanted us to
opinions
suffer.
that would probably tell you that yes, that
Yeah.
is the rationale.
I think maybe there's a little bit of truth on both sides. I think that maybe they thought you can't just throw money at this problem and the potato's gonna come back, the problem's gonna correct itself. Um, why not just eat
there
other
there were other things that they could have done along the way that they chose to not do to address it, and that's kind of the reason I think some people feel that Britain kind of allowed Ireland to suffer.
Okay, well, so there's if we're gonna say like put shine Britain in a bad light, I think this is a way to do it. So ironically, Ireland's known as Britain's breadbasket at the time. So it's its source of food essentially. And the Irish at this time, they're exporting fish, honey, grains, onions, all kinds of stuff. And it's not by choice, right? So why not just keep the food? Well, because they have to pay rent to these absentee landlords. Okay, well, isn't it better to eat the food and who cares if you get kicked out? Well, it's a little bit different than it is now because if you don't pay your rent at this period of time, you end up in jail. Well, the husband or the male in the family goes to jail and the rest of your family is destitute anyways. So this isn't a good look for Britain. Ireland is, it's sort of known worldwide at this point, maybe 1846 or whatever, that Ireland is struggling. I mean, people are dying in the worst possible way, like starving, malnutrition, slow, painful death, like you're shrinking away. Fever follows famine, as always, cholera, dysentery, typhoid fever, all these things are happening. And Ireland is shipping out food for Britain to eat. It's like, yikes, dude. It's kind of tough. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you explain that? Like, how do you wrap your head around, like, how is that possible? So that puts Britain in a really dark light.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They're
maybe,
allowing it to play out there, which, I said, like, it kind of feeds, it kind of plays into that attitude that, they had of Ireland with the stereotypes, with, you know, the issues with them being Catholic versus Protestant. Um, there's just a lot that feels like it was a problem that was allowed to play out because maybe the problem would solve itself one way or another. So
Yeah.
it's not, maybe not in the way that it best served Ireland. It does ultimately take a tax on Britain though. Like it does backfire in a way. They spend a lot of money having to pay for this problem that they've created because what ends up happening is poverty, right?
Yeah.
They no longer have their crops. They're starving. They're not making money. Um they so at this time a lot of the population starts to emigrate, right?
Yeah.
They have
If
they
they
have to
can.
they have to escape if they can. A lot of them, the goal is not to go to Britain where they are not welcomed or wanted. It is to go to like Canada, the United States, especially, or I say especially, I would assume especially, or other places. But a lot of them don't have the money to get there. So ultimately, they end up in a place they don't really want to be, and that doesn't really want them.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of problems for Britain financially and with other problems. Because one of the reasons why we decided to do this topic is to kind of decide if the Great Famine had a really significant impact on mental health or mental illness increase in Ireland during the time and following. So, starting that, Greg, one of the things that you mentioned was prisons.
Hmm.
So the prison system at the time, um, those were something that like started to get overflowing, right?
Hmm.
Um, but also they had these things called the asylums, which we know what asylums are, which also started to become half asylum, half prisons, right? So people were ending up in asylums for crimes. It just essentially became like holding cells for people, like holding places.
Deplorable, deplorable conditions.
Yes. They were overflowing to the point where the goal was no longer do we like they weren't even trying to cure people.
No.
It was just basically holding people. And one of the big things that really impacted the Irish population was this general consensus that, or this idea that they felt like Irish people were prone to mental illness. And therefore, it was kind of like assumed if they were having a hard time, it was assumed that there would be mental illness, but also getting out of the asylums was difficult as well because they kind of felt like they were going to be, if they had this mental illness now, they weren't going to be curable.
Yeah. So what about the idea that any country that has a history of being invaded may have a history, may sort of experience like a collective mental health issue? Like think about like a child. Like if you make it on a micro level, like a child in a family. Like if they're the people that are supposed to take like everything's going a certain way, everything's good, and then there's abuse or there's something terrible that happens or there's a trauma, and now that child's life takes a different trajectory.
Yeah.
Like that was what the Irish are living this fantastic little life in this beautiful little country, and then they're invaded and things change forever. Now their self-worth is, less than, and it puts them in a different trajectory. And I wonder if the drinking stereotype comes, what happens first? Like, is that a way that they self-medicated to
No,
kind of deal with
that
this?
was a stereotype that was already there. A
But
lot of the,
they were, invaded in, 1650 or something like that,
yeah.
Cromwell. So I mean maybe that's something they use to deal with that situation. And then or maybe it's just the justification the British have of belittling culture so that they can feel better about the things that they do to them. Isn't that
Yeah.
what we kind of have to do?
Yeah.
That's what the Germans did to the Jews. That's what, I mean, that's what we did to even in the Middle East, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
sort of create an other, like these are bad people or whatever.
Just to shed some light on, as far as like how this impacted Britain in Liverpool, um, the Irish made up 20% of the minority in Liverpool, but they actually made up 50% of the admissions into mental asylums. That's like a huge um, number right there, considering what a small portion of the actual population they even make up. So in order for 50% of mental asylum admissions to be of the Irish, you got to think about what's that criteria looking like where they're so easily, institutionalized.
I know, and like I wonder what that says like about the numbers in our prisons too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. It is a sort of like cultural discrimination
He,
without race.
listen to this number. In by the end of 1846, there were over 13,000 Irish people receiving poor relief in Liverpool. The year prior, the years prior, 900 total in Liverpool. Like,
Yeah, and if they weren't exporting all their goods, maybe they wouldn't be in this position, right? So you
yeah,
take away so it's such a weird thing. Like you take everything away from this country, you import it into your country, and then you have a problem with taking care of them.
yeah.
It's like
From 1846 to 1854, I have all these stats that like are just like so crazy, and just kind of highlighting how much it backfires on Britain. From 1846 to 1854, over 30% of the money spent on the poor in Liverpool, which was over £100,000, was spent on Irish people for the poor relief. And there's a few factors in Britain specifically. Like I'll get back to Ireland in a second, but in Britain of why there was such an influx in the admissions to mental asylums, and a big part of it was like, uh, you know, they would be at odds with like authority figures quite often. They were in these things called workhouses, and that's where they kind of took refuge. And that was a very common like route from where they would end up going into the mental asylums. From in the late 1860s, it accounted for 2/3 of the admissions to asylums, and that's because in those workhouses they would end up coming into contact often with like authority figures or police or something like that. Um, they were also 40 in 1849. I have a number here that the Irish were 40% of the prison numbers in Liverpool prisons. So they would often be in like examination of prison doctors, which make, anytime you're in front of a doctor or an authority figure, you're basically being assessed. So just having all that contact with those types of people already makes them be at a higher rate for like being judged, being
mhm.
assessed. If they have mental illness, you're going to go. And you got to think about, like we said, the stereotypes. They're already considered to be prone to mental illness. They're considered to be like these destitute people. Maybe they want to just get them off the streets. There's so many reasons they could have been, put into mental asylums beyond actually having
it's
a mental illness.
it's so interesting that you mentioned that because it's when I think of Irish people, and I've got a lot of Irish in me, and when I don't know, a stereotype is usually that they keep their problems close to the vest. They don't really talk about their issues a lot. And you're describing a scenario where if you get brought in front of the police or you get brought in front of a doctor and you start talking about the things that are wrong, then you get put away.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a development, and you're like almost like an adaptation to protect yourself from being put away. And that just passed down, almost like a generational trauma.
Yeah. Which I think is a huge thing right here. So like what I'm talking about with those numbers are mostly like first generation, but a big thing that comes out of this is the children of the parents of
Yeah.
the pregnant mothers during the famine. There is a huge increase in mental health, schizophrenia, like various things. For the next few generations. So in the early 1900s, Ireland has more mental hospital beds per head of population than any country in the world. So, you think of what just has surpassed, and you have to make some conclusions. Well, what would that be from? What could that be from?
Right.
Are the babies of these individuals more prone to mental illness because of what they've been through?
Well, like a super traumatic event can change your DNA, right? And then you pass on that DNA.
Well, yeah,
And you think of the alcoholism. Obviously, people drink to a lot of times to ease the pain, right? It's a painkiller in some way or to avoid something. Now, where else do you see high level like rates of alcoholism in a group? I don't know. Native American tribes in America.
yeah.
I mean, what happened to them? Like the British came in and took their land, or we did, or whatever you want to call it, but it was the British essentially. I don't know. It's just something that happens with people who are invaded and life as they know it completely changes forever. And ironically, Native American tribes and Abe Lincoln would be part of the groups that sent money to help the Irish.
Hmm.
And Queen Victoria donated from her own private,
Yeah,
um, her money. But that means nothing because as a country, she did nothing to help with all the suffering.
sure.
And the suffering, I think that's like something we haven't really made clear. These cholera, typhoid fever, starving, like when you think of
Starvation.
yeah,
Starvation.
starvation, like when you like envision that, there's this anecdote I read about a father and a son fighting to death over a potato, right? Like parents ripping food from their children's
Mhm.
hands. Once you're starving, it's like a really dark thing. And it reminds me of that whole thing we brought up a million times with Frankel at the Holocaust when he says the best of us didn't make it. I'm sure there was a lot of dark scenarios here. A million people dying from starvation. I mean, that's a lot of people,
Yeah.
like an eighth of the population dying.
So,
Not
and
that,
the big part that surprises me is how little. And you got to take this for what it's worth. This was obviously a very long time ago, so their understanding of certain things might be a little different. But it was really in like 1914. I was reading about this discovery of like inspectors of the asylums that, and this is in quotations, in the language of this time, an exceptional number of insane and idiots derived from the population born during the decade of 1841 to 1851. I mean, that's kind of like their conclusion. Like this is, the generation following the famine generation.
yeah, I mean, there's got to be a biological component to that too, like where you're having babies, but it's during malnutrition, right? I mean, the
Well, yeah,
nutrients aren't
I
there.
mean, that's what they're saying. That I
That
mean, but like, just it takes them that long to kind of conclude that, oh, this must be tied into this. Like that wasn't just like a general thought of thing. Um, so it's the idea is, yeah, like you're saying, the children that are born of these individuals who endured these horrors and epidemics of disease and starvation and all this stuff are now falling victims to mental disease later.
right,
So they're more, maybe they're more predisposed. I think we covered all of this in the generational trauma episode,
right,
where you're just more predisposed to certain things. Or there's that you've mentioned a few times. You're exactly right. There's a lot of work being done with epigenetics, to kind of, make studies to kind of connect this stuff, like how DNA changes when individuals go through traumatic experiences. I
sure.
heard I heard someone refer to the famine, the people who experience the famine, and as going through PTSD, and I thought that was like, duh, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Like, why is that not more widely thought of as a response?
In the same way, though, like that, this can be crippling to the psyche, right, and kind of destroy a people. All they really need, the Irish. So like, I want to make sure that we shine a positive light too, because huge emigration numbers to America, right, and of course they're discriminated against in America. But after the Civil War, the people in America realized like, holy, like these are strong, hardworking, loyal, great people, and they really make a name for themselves. And the Civil War is in 18, ends in 1865. So this is like the same group of people basically that are coming
Mhm.
over and fighting this war with us. And then after that, start using their numbers, because there's huge numbers of Irish in these communities, to vote and make changes for themselves and like develop into, I don't know, the Kennedys or whatever, like these huge dynasties. But all they needed was something that they could kind of like, make meaning and hope. And it's like give someone a purpose and the ability to do it. And it's
Yeah,
amazing how their brains can completely change. Like
yeah,
those British people during the raids who, they were in all the asylums, and they were like, we need someone to drive the ambulances, and they did that, and now all of a sudden they're back at it. They're back and healthy.
yeah.
So they just needed something.
There, there's a few other populations that they were able to draw comparisons with, that experience, I guess you would say, similar, maybe not to the same extent
Mhm.
of hardship that the Irish went through. So there was the Dutch winter hunger of 1914, and the people who were in gestation during that period had twice the risk of schizophrenia in later life compared to those not exposed to famine conditions during the pre-birth development. And then there were similar results from China during the Chinese famine of 1959 to 1961. So basically, the effects of hunger and stress on developing brain prior to the birth can lead to like altered patterns of brain development in childhood and increased risk of schizophrenia in young adulthood. And this is possibly the same as what the Irish experienced after the Great Famine.
Wow, that is pretty interesting. I wonder if
So,
the numbers are like, Holocaust numbers.
yeah.
Yeah, who knows, right? So, what does this say about the Irish? Like, I guess we're saying it now, but like, what else does this do to the Irish psyche? I mean, we're talking generational trauma. I think toughness, though, right? Too. Aren't the Irish sort of known for their toughness and they like fighting and um
So you're just
freckles?
going to lean into the stereotypes.
Yeah.
um, you know, I can imagine what this must have done for them following it. There must have been a lot of anger. I think an interesting concept here, though, is that one where a lot of them emigrated with the intention to like escape the completely, but then they get trapped in Britain or in places they didn't that they didn't want as their ending point.
Yeah.
And we think about like what that does to be in a place where you're not wanted and flee from home, but only to end up in a place that doesn't want you, and you're like, you think about why crime might be up in that population. They must constantly be on hyper vigilant, right,
Yeah,
on the
of
defense.
course.
Like, nobody wants me here. um I could get attacked at any time.
Everyone's dangerous.
Everyone's scrutinizing my behavior because they're assuming I'm going to do certain things. They're assuming I'm a certain way. Britain is really like getting resentful of them because of all the money spent on them, but also they don't want to share the same wages with them because they feel they don't deserve it. Why should they? They don't care about their living arrangements. They don't care about education. They're
Yeah.
not furthering our society. They're primitive. So there's so much like negativity against them. Think
And
about
I
what
wonder,
that
like,
generation must be like.
if, because obviously the Irish in America ended up, obviously it was tough in the beginning, but they ended up doing really well here and being really successful here. And
They just had
there's
to start a bunch of gangs in New York.
started gangs, sure, but that's leadership. And eventually, really like a political machine. The Irish became like a political machine. And I wonder if they did so well in America because America has this natural sort of angst with Britain too. Like we're like anti-Britain too. So maybe they felt more comfortable here than anywhere else
Yeah.
besides their home country. But like if they had to be anywhere else, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Hmm.
And that's why
Yeah.
America can become a pretty nice home for them.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting because a lot of, like we said earlier in the very start of this, we understood some aspects of the Great Famine.
Hmm.
We clearly did not know so many of these details until now. Uh, the idea of the asylums is interesting because that's something I never really thought of in connection with this. And this was a big deal. Their asylum rates skyrocketed. And it, again, kind of also feeding into this idea of how the famine really did impact mental illness. The first admission rates to asylums between 1860 to 1875 reached like, I'm sorry, from 1857 to 1868 in the areas worst affected were significantly like increased versus the areas surrounding that were less affected. So, I mean, right there, you kind of see that correlation of how, the areas that were affected really did struggle with mental illness. I also just want to point out, Greg, I just did a quick little thing on quick little lookup of like effects that starvation can have on the brain. And I thought that this emotional and cognitive changes it can have: depression, anxiety, irritability, increased mood fluctuations, intense and negative emotional reactions, decreased enthusiasm, reduced motivation, impaired concentration, um, obsessional thinking, reduced alertness, all these things that could eventually lead to some problem behavior, right?
Yeah, essentially not good. It's essentially not good for the brain.
Social changes, feeling more critical of others, withdrawn and isolated, loss of humor, feelings of social inadequacy. Now take that with actually being persecuted by the society around you for those individuals that are in,
Yeah, it's
places where
horrific.
so much of this just goes against them that they have to like endure.
And then there's that part of it too, where like to me, this is the one of the huge problems with imperialism, where it's like, oh, you're not civilized. So the British thinking that the Irish aren't civilized, so they're on their beautiful plot of land. They're maybe they all had tiny little farms, maybe like 5 acres, but like beautiful in Ireland, right? And they're in their mud huts. Yes, fine, they lived in mud huts, but it's actually super clean because they lived with pigs, and pigs are very clean animals, contrary to popular belief. Whatever. So here they are, they're living, they're outside, breathing that beautiful air, farming their own land with their families. And the British are like, you're not civilized. And so all this turmoil, yeah. And then you're that person who once was on a farm, and now you're in some corner of some asylum in some building with dank air. And here you go. Now you're civilized.
And
It's
now
like,
and you can't get out
yeah,
because they think you're incurable, which is
like,
crazy. You might not even have had anything wrong with you in the first place.
so like it just like was another culture judging about what's civilized and what's not, and it's like, dude, you just ruined everything.
Yeah.
I just really, and then but the other side of that though is, so imperialism is awful. We can all say that, but without imperialism, there's no diversity. So there's a tough sort of catch-22 there,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the world isn't the way it is. It's not this diverse place unless without imperialism, but also there the horrific nature of imperialism. So I don't know. It's all kind
Yeah.
of tough.
It is. So I think we're able to conclude that the Great Famine had some serious impacts on the mental health of the individuals, not only living during that time, but also generations to come. And I think it brought on PTSD,
Yep.
generational trauma, all those, things that some people don't want to talk about today. But I think it's definitely present, whether it changed the DNA, whether it just changed the outlook of life and the way that people are raised and stuff like that to be a little bit more feeling like you're have to watch your back, things like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's definitely something. And I think that this is something that we can learn from today, knowing that these are the impacts of things that can happen to these big, natural disasters, or, you know, even if it's somewhat, man-made by relying on a crop that doesn't even really
Yeah, it doesn't
that's
belong there
being
anyway.
like
Yeah.
imported. But like, if this were ever to happen anywhere, how would we respond that would be different than this?
I don't know.
How do you feel like neighboring countries should reach out, should offer support? Should
Yeah,
we
but
take
it's
the
like kind of,
laissez-faire approach?
yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of, oh, so it's easy to sit here where we're at and judge and say, oh, I would have done this and I would have done that. But like you're right. This kind of thing's happening probably right now. And it is
Yeah,
happening, right? When you look
it
at
is
Gaza and
actually.
everything.
There's
So yeah,
multiple places,
yeah.
even
So it's like
Ukraine.
happening right now, and
Yeah,
here we go. We're just talking about it. And then
but
we're
that
not
is
as good.
why I think today
It's hard to say, but
the populations seem to understand it better, though. I think people
yeah.
understand, like, we are sitting here while this stuff's happening, and I think there are people who are in outrage, right?
Mhm.
And they're trying to, you know, make their word known in any way they can, and sometimes it's done really well, sometimes it feels off based, but ultimately, the real people who can impact don't always want to listen because money is always a factor and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that what we can all do as people, though, is just be a little bit more understanding of what comes out of these things, how it can impact generation after generation, or even understand, for recent events that have happened, how, survivors of that might be impacted and how their next generation is going to be impacted as well. Just get a better understanding of people as a whole, I guess. Right.
Or you could
And
make a
like,
rap like Sinead O'Connor did. Like Sinead O'Connor did. Do you remember? Have you ever heard that little rap she did about this?
a long time ago, I can't remember it.
It's all right.
It's all
But she
right.
was right though. She was right. I mean, when she was talking, because I remember hearing that and being like, "What?" But it was talking about like the potato famine and how we had all the food we needed. We were just sending it all away.
Yeah.
You know, it's
But
tough
they
stuff.
had to, right?
They had no choice. Yeah.
So they didn't have all the food because it wasn't theirs, really, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think she was trying to say if it wasn't for the British,
Yeah, it all
and
comes back to
you know what's
that.
like strange about that is like, didn't she have like a big beef with the Pope too? It was like anti-Catholic Church, and that's strange in a way, right? Because weren't they very Catholic historically speaking?
Yeah, but that was like what 1980s.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was about like something else. You know what I'm saying? Who knows?
Well, there's a
They,
like the Protestant wars in Ireland, isn't there? Been a
oh
lot of
yeah,
issues with that. So who knows?
who knows?
Maybe that's something we should look into.
I wanted to say something about I had a hard time looking for. I like to sometimes bring up pop culture. Not a whole lot there. There's this movie Black 47 that's sort of about it, and then I think that's it.
Yeah.
Leap Year is a good one.
You
Angela
mentioned it. There
Smashes.
was a documentary about it, isn't there?
Yeah. That was actually pretty good. I saw most of that. Liam Neeson does a good job, as always. Um, but yeah, no, this is a really sad
And
subject. I'm glad we brought it on because
real Irish cinema is not like very popular. I'm not saying it's bad. There's actually like I've seen some indie films from Ireland that I really enjoy. There's indie horror, Irish horror that I like.
what about that movie, The Banshees of Inisherin or whatever it
Yeah,
was?
that one, that's a
That
more
was a really
recent
good
one. That
movie.
was with Colin Farrell.
I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
And it had some of those tropes that we're talking about here, like loss and death and immigration, right? I mean, it had all those themes:
Yeah.
isolation, abuse. It was all there.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of really like, and there's a great sense of pride with Irish people. They always have like a tattoo of a shamrock somewhere. Like it's very, I like that group. You know,
American Irish, you talking about?
I guess I would have to be, yeah, since that's all I know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was wear a Celtics hat.
Boston Irish people you're talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely all I know. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, I just think that hopefully the takeaway from this in this long-winded spiel about a famine is when tragedy hits, when large events that can affect an entire population of people hit, there is always going to be some kind of fallout. And
mhm.
when it comes to, the realm that we like to speak about, mental health and psychology, it's pretty much understood, there is going to be impacts to that. And, it is important that we all have an understanding of that. So we learn how to interact with each other better. So that we learn how to support each other better. It would have been amazing if during this time they were able to go through this famine without also having that prejudice against them.
Mhm.
And, having it's almost like they were trapped from, whether it's in the famine or it's just in terrible conditions somewhere else. It was a lose-lose for a lot of them.
Lose. Bad stretch.
Yeah.
Bad stretch for the Irish. But things are looking much better now.
So yes, I guess that kind of takes us home on that.
That takes us home on that. But I'm glad we did this because I hadn't thought of it in terms of like picturing gaunt, really emaciated people. When in the past, when I thought about the potato famine, I always just kind of thought it was like almost like an economic problem, like a recession or something. Oh, we ran out of potatoes, and maybe that's what they called money or something. But like, I mean, it's just like it was just one of those things for me where I was like, that doesn't sound like it's too big of a deal. The word famine doesn't do it enough. It should be like the starvation or like I don't know.
You don't think famine's a good word?
I don't think it's great.
Huh.
I don't think it.
Have you ever said I'm famished?
Yeah, maybe that's the problem. I've
Because you
said that
say it
quite a
and you don't
bit.
mean it,
Yeah,
and you're just being like, you just want a snack.
yeah. It's like I'm famished, but I wouldn't.
Maybe you overuse the word famished.
Maybe I
Maybe you
need to
shouldn't
rethink
try to
it.
use such fancy words all the
If I
time.
take anything from this, I'm going to stop using that, throwing the word famine around all willy nilly. I'm going to be more serious
Well,
about
you
it.
didn't say you were famished.
That's true.
because that would have been like next level right there.
Yeah, I'm feminist right now.
Whoa. Somebody get Greg a granola bar.
I'm doing intermittent feminishing. Okay.
You're laughing at tragedy.
No, no.
Oh
Hey, that's what the
boy.
Irish do. You got to laugh at it. You're
They
gonna make.
laugh in the face of tragedy.
That's right. Like I
That's
said
what they
before,
always say about them.
jokes, fighting, and freckles. That's what it's all about.
Jokes, fighting, and freckles.
That's it's the motto, I think.
Uh, that's said by Greg, everyone.
Yeah.
Send
Oh
your death
boy,
threats to Greg.
Kennedys. They did all right, although they had their problems too.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother issue. We talk about mental health. The mental health continued.
Hmm.
There's a lot of mental health issues in that family. We know that.
Yeah.
Okay. You should probably get me off the microphone.
All right. Shut up, Greg. All right. Okay. Well, everybody, have a great St. Patrick's Day. Just go through our regular bit that we do at the end of every episode. We appreciate you. Thank you for everyone who's reached out. We've had some cool messages. Been able to interact with a few people, which has been nice. I think the thing that shocks me, and I mentioned this to someone who reached out, is just that idea of how wide our reach can be through just like a platform like you and I talking over microphones to each other, and we're able to reach people in other countries, other all over the place, and have really like people are super open about stuff that like they've connected to, that they've listened to, about some of their own struggles. I just find that to be absolutely amazing and kind of mind-blowing. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, all right. And then I want to share this. We had a recent, listen in a different like country and different states.
What country?
Damn, it went away. Darn it. There was a new country and it was funny and I wanted to say it.
Oh well.
It wasn't a country, it was a town in somewhere. I forget what it was. The most recent, where is Silesia? Silesia. Where is that, Greg?
I don't know. It sounds
Point
like
to that on a globe.
I would say Eastern Europe.
Is that your final guess?
Yeah.
Cool. So we reached out to there recently, which is awesome. Yeah, so I can't find it anymore. Oh well. But anyways, please reach out to us if you want to share. You can we're always going to beg and plead for you to please leave a rating and review wherever you are listening so that you can help with the algorithms, because anytime we get a rating and review, that makes our episode just that much more accessible to a wider audience. So that is very much appreciated when it's done. And also, we super love the feedback. We will read your review on air because it just means a ton to us. And we like to be able to share that. If you want to just have a more candid dialogue or share something a little bit more sensitive that you don't want to put out there for everybody, you're more than welcome to reach out to us on social media. We have a lot of people that reach out to us on Instagram. Just know that if you do reach out to us and we don't get to it right away, it might be hidden in our little request thing. So we do check that, but like not as frequently. So just be patient with us. But we do respond to pretty much everybody, always.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, yeah, always. So yeah,
Silesia is Eastern Europe.
dang, dude, that's crazy.
What are you gonna
You
do?
listen to the narcissist episode. Very popular one. What does that say about our society that the narcissist episode is so popular?
I know.
People are intrigued, but they all know one too.
Yeah, and they wonder if it's them.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so everybody have a safe and fun and joyous St. Patrick's Day. I know that this episode was a little bit of a downer, but you now have this day where you can just go out, even if you're not Irish like me, just partake, have fun with it.
And feel good about eating. You know what I mean?
Yes. Enjoy another culture's gifts to us.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. Like they've given us the gifts of corned beef and
I'm doing it.
Yeah, Irish stout and all the other
Ah,
good stuff. And
yeah.
Irish breakfasts and all these things. I always eat the Irish bangers that Trader Joe does every year that I couldn't find this year. But then it turns out bangers are more of an English thing, which is
Yeah, so don't do that this time. And I'm just gonna dip my mustache in a nice Guinness, and that's a nice happy thing for me.
there you go. I actually have a what's it called? An Irish cream stout. You know, Irish cream, like the
Like
flavor.
Bailey's?
Yeah, yeah. Like I have a stout that's it got that flavor in it. I'm super excited to drink. And then I'll get something more from something imported from Ireland as well. But super
Okay.
excited to dabble.
Why is
Like
Guinness
I said,
kind of like lowbrow? Like that's not doing it right?
did I just make you insecure? Because
Well, no, Dave. I mean, you're always sort of cutting edge, obscure shit, and I'm just kind of like not.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna have a Guinness because I'm a simple man, and you're gonna have some beer from some corner of Cork or whatever, and I'm just not. And you're gonna have this, the full layout, and I'm gonna have Lucky Charms for breakfast.
And
Your
I'm gonna
choice.
watch Leprechaun.
Well, and I'm gonna watch Leap Year, the rom-com, which I really actually do like. I really do like
I
it.
don't know that I've seen it.
Amy Adams.
Okay.
She's one of my favorites.
Is she?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I don't like the way you said "oh yeah" and then like stared at me intensely, but all right. That was a bit much.
One of my favorites. I don't know.
Oh yeah. All right, Greg. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. Try not to miss us. Love y'all.
We love you.